reading. It's like being completely present and completely absent at the same time.
Hello, welcome to Tsundoku. Annie and Sarah with you today. Sarah, we've got a potential Miles Franklin Award winner on the podcast today.
We sure do, Annie. It's Brian Castro. He's an author that's revered in literary circles and many times nominated, long-listed and shortlisted for this award, and quite a few others. This book, The Chinese Postman, is an autofictional meditation on the experience of old age.
And autofiction being...
That's
where you blur the boundaries between yourself and your character, or you write about yourself.
Yeah, it's basically making up a story with yourself in it.
Well, I like the sound of that.
So in this book, The Chinese Postman, the central character is Abe Quin. And in Kath's interview, we'll hear Brian explain the complex relationship he shares with this character and Abe Quin's life. Of course, Abe is a postman.
My cousin offered me a job on his newspaper when I graduated, and I turned it down, preferring Australia where, as they say, one could be good by sea and drunk by lunch. So I began a career as a dodgy postie. I did sorting, collecting, and graduated to delivering, something I did for 8 months. And what I learned from the Chinese postman problem was an algorithm stating that one should avoid walking the same street twice in the midst of life's many crises.
The interview's coming up in a moment, but first, Annie, what author have you tracked down?
Bronwyn Rivers, she's another literary academic that can also write a blazingly good story. And she did her doctorate at the University of Oxford on 19th century women's novels, and she was an academic researcher and a book reviewer in England. So I find it so amazing that she's turned her hand to writing thrillers. And it's everybody's favourite genre at the moment, which is rural noir, Australian rural noir, which I think is giving the Nordics a bit of a run for their money once they start being filmed into series, and they have already, I think. Anyway, this one's an absolute page-turner. It's called The Reunion, and it's very character-driven. No dead bodies at the beginning, which has been an annoying thing I've found about a lot of that kind of fiction. Less dead bodies and more mystery.
Oh, I like it. Back to Brian Castro now and his book, The Chinese Postman. He spoke to our tsundoku colleague, Kath Keneally, and this other quote from Brian gives you some idea about the book's preoccupation with life's final chapter.
There is no getting away from death. As Anne Carson says about her life, there it is before you, possibly a road, a ribbon, a dotted line, a map. Let's say you're 25, then you make some decisions, you do things, have setbacks, have triumphs, become someone, a bus driver, a professor of Indo-European linguistics, a pirate, a cosmetologist, and years pass, maybe in a family, maybe not, maybe happy, maybe not. And then one day you wake up and you're 70. Looking ahead, you see a black doorway. You begin to notice that the black doorway is always there, at the edge, whether you look at it or not.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
There, what a lovely introduction to Chinese Postman. It's not the sort of book we can talk about for its narrative arc.
No.
Well, we could.
Well, if you can invent one,
we
that'd be
can
good.
invent one. But it is a book written in snippets and fragments, and it starts with some word pictures of an ageing man losing his grip on and his taste for life. Very T.S. Eliot, these fragments I have shored against my ruins. And actually the word ruin crops up repeatedly in the book. But as you say, there's also a smile behind it, a sort of, am I worth all this grand soliloquising? And is that how you embarked on the job?
I think
writing?
so. It's more ironic than belly laughs. But I think Quin, you see, I moved between the first person and the third, and by moving into the third, I can satirise him. Satirising oneself doesn't quite work. And he is a comic character to a certain extent. He's a curmudgeon, he's solitary, he's hopeless in social situations. Never met a girl until he was like 30. So that's the kind of person he is, and he's able to be satirised in that sense, yeah.
So insofar, Brian, as there is a story, it's a story of Abe Quin, or Chin, might be pronounced. He's a one-time Adelaide Hills postman. He's a sometime professor of literature. He's facing the end of days, he's musing, he's expecting it all to be downhill from here until a sort of future does present itself. Do you want to fill in what that future is looking like for him?
He gets an email from a woman, whom he thinks is a woman, from Ukraine, saying, how can you write so eloquently about war? She's obviously read his other books, because several other books deal with wartime and his father's time in the war, etc. You know, you don't know whether this is a scam or not, because it happens so often. You know, I love your books, you know, and then suddenly they're asking for money. She doesn't ask for money, but she gets deeper and deeper into analysing his works, and this forms a kind of almost a semi-romantic epistolary relationship. And in one way, he doesn't ever want to meet this woman because it's self-preserving. So any action would mean having to take action. But he does get deeper and deeper into it, and you don't know whether she is a scammer or not. But the writing is what intrigued me, the letter writing, as in the old-fashioned sense, only sent by email. Yeah.
Have you got any feedback from Ukraine or Ukrainian readers?
No, I haven't. Yeah, during my boarding school days, I used to get invited to friends' houses during holidays, and one friend was Polish, and so I lived in a Polish household with Polish spoken all the time and blueberry soup, you know. And I really enjoyed that cultural exchange. I learned a few words and things like that. So that put me closer to Ukraine because it's on the border with Ukraine. And I was asked once, you know, if you're so interested in Ukraine, why don't you go there or go to Poland, because you're not allowed to enter Ukraine anymore. So I thought, maybe if I booked a passage to Krakow and, you know, met some of the refugees. But I'm not that kind of investigative journalist, and, you know,
Not necessarily.
No.
So I'm quoting, it was a fact that Quin thought only in bowers of vignettes, and he scrabbled to make sense by being toneless and dry. I like that. And the vignettes are part memory, part fantasy. I mean, a lot of fantasies woven around Irina.
Yes.
Part speculation. Do they congregate in your mind when you think back under headings?
Not really. Somebody did mention, and I wasn't conscious of it, but they said, this is about fantasy. This book is about a man fantasizing. And I didn't really quite think about that. I thought, maybe that's true. But no, I don't see them in steps like that. I think I wrote these in, as you say, vignettes, which is a good term because it also is a term derived from grapes, the grapevine. So the grapevine is not necessarily true, but it's whispers of voices that, you know, may lead to a whole lot of untruths, but fantasies as well.
Yeah. Well, I'd say myself, one of the headings was probably alienness or foreignness, which gives Quin such a sharp perspective. And he's not actually anything identifiable. In China, he's a foreigner,
Yes.
and it's foreign to him. He's a professor of English with this Hong Kong Chinese background. He's living in Australia. How does he see his adoptive country?
I think with two sides, you know, he looks at it in two sides. I mean, obviously he's now so old that, you know, he's quite comfortable in his role. So he stops kicking up, which I think in younger days he would have done. One of those coming to terms with his old age is solitude, which is far better sometimes than, you know, constant socializing, because constant socializing, you will always encounter people whom you think might be prejudiced or, you know, envious or whatever. But solitude, you know, as Candide said, you know, you cultivate your own garden, which is probably the best thing to do at this time, in this moment in history where politics can break up your family, arguments over the dinner table can cause all kinds of friendships to break down. And so that's probably what Quin is trying to do.
Let's go back to ruin.
Okay.
And Quin's recurring preoccupation with toilets and defecation.
Yes.
And les ruines.
Yes.
And it's kind of funny, but it's kind of getting at something profound.
Well, it's part of the body.
Yeah.
It's writing the body, as it were. But also scatological moments is, let's say it's about waste. And you can't have value unless you understand waste. So basically, they're two sides of the same coin. I mean, if you've got a gold coin, it's only because you can waste it that it is valuable. I mean, if you keep it in a safe and never ever spend it, then you don't spend any. I mean, spending a penny is an interesting phrase to use. But also the history of excrement, if you like, is a strong history, especially in European cultures. So the French, for instance, have written books on Louis XIV's Versailles. And where did the waste go? Huge cesspit, by the side of the chateau or whatever it was. And so he built, huge orchards of oranges and groves of things that were nice smelling to keep the smell away. The history of this is quite interesting because the servants had to carry the pots, full pots, down three stories, I think, or 2.5 stories. And they got tired of this. They used to throw it out the window, And so people visiting had to put up their...
Onto the plaza.
Yes, put up their parasols.
Yeah, it seemed to me it was quite a nice sort of metaphor, if you like, for the balance in the book, which is between abjection and that amused irony.
Yes.
Perhaps.
Yes, abjection is a good point because, we sanitise things and writing shouldn't be sanitised. As Roland Barthes said, written shit doesn't smell. So, and we sanitise death as well. And, one of my thoughts in this book was, you are born in excrement, really. I mean, as a young baby, a newborn baby. And then you die probably in excrement in a nursing home or something. So without joking too much on that, my publisher said, look, is this full of toilet jokes? I said, no. No, it's just important, I think.
I agree. So Quin can't really preserve this ironic detachment that he's aiming for. And one of the saving graces of where he finds himself now is he's newly sensitised to the natural world, to tiny natural goings-on. He says, actuality is what is most important to me now.
Yes.
What does he mean by that?
I think, being in nature and having a totally new view of nature, in other words, stop using animals as just, cattle for beef and killing things, to eat and or to sell. So he takes on a new role amongst his animals, wild as well as tame, domesticated, dogs, full of dogs. And I think that notion also gives him some idea that the natural world is, we keep overlooking the natural world. I think the little world, little animals, little birds, and we don't take enough pleasure from that. So I think, that's probably Quin's notion.
And I said to you before we started this interview that having read the book through now twice, I'm now just dipping in and savouring little bits, which is perfectly possible to do, and maybe it's the correct way to read it.
I think it is, because it was written in fragments, and these fragments are, I call them little cantatas, little songs. They don't necessarily form a narrative arc, as it were, but there is an extended metaphor that goes with them, and that forms the book. So, I think somebody said they're like little postage stamps, and then you put them together and they form an album or a series or something like that. I mean, going back to your very beginning, if you look at Eliot's The Wasteland, which is perfect as an example for placing against this novel, there is no plot. What is it? It's a song of despair, I think, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. And also I'm finding doing this dipping in, I'm feeling much less depressed by the book. At first I thought, oh no.
Sorry.
There's no hope. And now I'm much more attuned to the humour, and I'm actually finding I just come away with a smile when I do that. I guess Chinese Postman is a wry reference to your writing career.
I suppose. I don't know.
Letters in
dropping letters, yes.
people's
dropping
boxes in the
letters.
hope that they might read them, or circulars perhaps, more
Circulars,
likely.
yes,
That's
yes.
what Abe does at one point. He
Yes.
writes a little love letter inside
In
to the
microscript,
householder
yeah.
in microscripts,
Yeah.
completely ignored.
Yes. Again, it's a self-irony. He doesn't really want it to be read. If it were read, he'd be in trouble, you see. So it's a form of meditation.
Yeah.
And folding these into origami shapes and dropping them into her letterbox. It's intriguing for her if she would open it, but she doesn't. She throws them away thinking this is a sort of realtor, circular or something, and, to the householder, that kind of letter. Sorry.
I just wondered if it was, if that's how you thought about sending a book out into the world. If you're the sending circulars that may or may not be read, or dropping them into people's letterboxes.
Yes, probably messages in bottles,
Messages
I think, and kind of left to the sea to decide who picks them up. I suppose that's always the way readers have treated my work. It's too difficult, it's complicated, etc. But they've got to unravel it. So it's a message that is coded, and if they do the work, then they get the reward, as you've done, hopefully.
Yeah, absolutely. So I agree. And final question: did you imagine that the book would be read mostly by your age cohorts?
From sort of pre-polling, if you like, a lot of old people said, yeah, it's great, good idea, and blah, blah, blah. Young people are taking it up too, which is strange, but I think they take it up together with the whole of my previous work. So they see the progression from Birds of Passage, for instance, my first book, which was a young narrator of about 25 or something, to this old man, Quin, who's, 75. So they're looking at this lifespan as well, which is great.
Novelist Brian Castro talking to our own Kath Keneally about the Chinese Postman. And I'd just like to add some of the comments the Miles Franklin judges made about the Chinese Postman. They called the book set in the shadowlands of mortal life and said that he'd created a fine and profound novel. So good luck in the awards, Brian. Chinese Postman by Brian Castro is published by Giramondo Publishing.
Talking now about a new addition to the fine and growing genre of Aussie rural noir, which is giving the Nordics a run for their money. Bronwyn Rivers' book is called The Reunion, and I'll set up the interview with Bronwyn with the little teaser that appears on the back of the book. 10 years ago, 6 teenagers hiked into the Blue Mountains wilderness, and only 5 came out alive. The survivors have barely seen each other since the tragic bushwalk. ...
So this is about when the 5 remaining friends are reuniting on the 10th anniversary of the death of their friend Ed Fletcher. So they are travelling to the home of Ed's mother, Martha, which is a farmhouse deep within the Blue Mountains forest where they went on their fateful bushwalk. And when they arrive, the house is in terrible condition. Martha is in a very bad way. It's very hot, it's very isolated, and it's pretty clear something terrible is about to happen. And so the central question in the present day narrative is what really happened to Ed all those years ago? But more importantly, how far will someone go in order to get that truth?
It's a wonderful set piece, the house in the wilderness, the haunting mystery from the past, and the cast of friends who really don't know each other as well as they think they do. Is that where you started with a framework like that and that you then just build from there?
I knew I wanted to write what's often referred to as a country house mystery, or some people call it a locked room mystery. So that's quite a classic structure in crime writing since the Golden Age when Agatha Christie did it with And Then There Were None. And then it's been done lots, but more recently Lucy Foley's The Hunting Party was a massive hit with the same sort of idea. So it's the bunch of people go away, often for a weekend, often quite literally to a country house away from their normal lives, and they're thrown together. And I suppose the useful thing for a novelist is they can't get away, and all the interrelationships between them are kind of heightened. All the pressures and tensions come out and are quite interesting and useful if you want to write a crime novel in particular. So I grew up loving those kind of golden age stories by Agatha Christie and then more recently P.D. James. So when I thought about writing crime, that's a structure I kept returning to. And then I thought I really wanted to give it an Australian setting because I'm Australian and I know the landscape here and I really love it and it's fun to write about. But I also thought the Australian landscape, because it's so, well, it's beautiful, but it's also quite harsh often and can be quite creepy. So when I thought about what landscape I wanted to use, I went to the Blue Mountains because I'm familiar with it. It's a beautiful landscape. It can be quite creepy and sort of feel a bit dangerous and threatening with the very tall, very sheer cliffs that just drop away, and then the very thick forests in which it's easy to get lost, and people do in fact get lost. So that was kind of two things that came together when I thought about the story that I put into this book.
When you're actually writing a story with such a sense of place, do you need to go there to write?
I didn't need to go to the Blue Mountains to write this story because I knew it so well. So I grew up in Newcastle, which is about 2-3 hours drive from the Blue Mountains. And so that was a place I went to very often growing up. My parents would take me there almost every year for a winter holiday, and we'd stay in some little house and I'd be taken on bushwalks. At first I would grumble, but then when I got older I grew to love them. And so very familiar with that landscape. And so I actually wrote this book a few years back. I think we were in lockdown for part of it, and so couldn't have gone there, but I didn't need to because I'm just very familiar with that landscape. And over the years have spent time writing there, in that I've been lucky enough to go to Varuna, which is in Katoomba, and usefully located a short walk from the bush that I write about. So yeah, I didn't have to go back there while I was writing. I just happened to really know that landscape very well.
Now the characters, the remaining 5, Hugh, Charlotte, Alex, Laura and Jack, are at a kind of really interesting point in their lives. So the 10 years earlier they were just leaving school, and now that's a very important 10 years in anybody's life through their 20s. Was that a deliberate choice because people really find out who they are in those years?
Yes, I wanted to choose a time period where people were, well, when I was setting up the story, I knew I wanted a secret from the past that had been buried that people then had to confront. And in a crime or psych thriller, it's usually a pretty bad secret. So I had the idea of having the people who are involved be still children, because it would maybe be more understandable that they'd done these things, because I guess most of us have done things we regret, but maybe not things as bad as the people in this book do. But if they were children at the time, that might be a way of empathizing more with them. And then I needed a bit of time to pass so that, yes, they could grow and develop in the meantime, or maybe be affected by what had happened back then. And that was a useful period where, yeah, like you say, in your early 20s, you're developing, figuring out who you are. And it was a period of time that allowed them to have slightly shifted in their relationships with each other as well, and then have to confront each other as 10 years on young adults, as opposed to the kind of children they still were at the time of the bushwalk.
It's kind of a slow peeling back of personalities throughout the book. A lot of authors say often the plot leads them. They're really not sure until they're halfway through or 3/4 of the way through where things are heading. And this is very much Agatha Christie. We're waiting to find out the secret. Was there any of that, or did you know what you wanted to happen right from the start?
Only in a loose sense. Like I said, I wanted the country house mystery. I wanted a secret from the past. I started thinking about what that could be. I knew the Blue Mountains would be a wonderful place to set a book. I thought about what could have gone wrong in the mountains, and an accident on a bushwalk was an obvious thing. And then I knew I wanted a group story. So people said to me when I was writing courses, and this is advice that is given to writers, you must have a protagonist. It must be it must be someone's journey. There must be a main character who the story is really about. And I didn't really necessarily agree with that because I thought I'd read books over the years where it was pretty hard to work out who the main character was. So I knew I wanted a group of people, and a group lends itself to that kind of country house mystery as well. So I started thinking about a group and what relationships might exist within the group that would lend themselves to conflict and tension, which you need in a crime novel. And so, for example, there is romantic entanglements between some members of the group, and it sort of went from there. But in terms of what actually happens in the book, it was sort of a chicken and egg process where I think about what event. So crime novels are quite often they have a kind of structure, a genre expectation in terms of how they're structured, twists and so forth, and reveals. So I knew I had to work some of them in. Yeah, so I did actually do writing a thriller course along the way and took some advice from that. And I mean, I guess in the end, it's a matter of judgment. Is a book too twisty or not twisty enough? It's a matter of personal preference as well. So I think about, it'd be useful to have a shift in the reader's understanding of this or that, what could happen, what kind of character would lead that to happen. But then also I was also developing the characters as well, and I wanted them to drive the story because that's, I mean, people I think when they think about a book, they often think about what happens, but I think probably the most interesting part of many books is the characters and their motivations and why they do things and their backstories. So that also influenced the decisions I made about what happened. So,
You have to care about the characters, really, as a reader.
You do. Otherwise, it's not very interesting. You know, you'll read the book just to find out what happened, but it won't stay with you, I think, unless you care about the characters.
Now, I had a late night because I had to get to the end, and I'm wondering what kind of feedback you've had from readers so far on that.
I've had exactly that, and it makes me smile and fist pump because what I really wanted was a book that was interesting and the one people didn't have to sort of push themselves through to read because, I mean, I guess these days we're all busy and most of us have had our attention span shattered by the internet. And so, I mean, I years ago used to read big, thick books for days on ends when I was studying and working, and I'm not sure I could do that anymore. So, like everyone, my attention span for reading is maybe not what it was. So I definitely wanted a book that was going to be interesting. And a number of people have said, I had to stay up late to finish your book. And I said, I'm sorry, but not really sorry. Or someone said, I had to take it to work and sneak peeks during the day, and then I read it on the bus, and then I read it walking home from the bus, and I was so pleased. I mean, I was so flattered, and I thought, excellent, mission accomplished.
You were obviously a fan of Famous Five, and as you've said, Agatha Christie and so forth, but you have had a pretty serious academic career looking at 19th century women writers and being a book reviewer. So can you pinpoint the moment when this change of direction happened, when you decided you'd rather write?
Well, I was an academic for many years and studied and had a research job. And I suppose part of the shift was, I loved reading growing up and I loved studying it and got the opportunity to keep on studying it, which was just impossible to turn down, really, and such a wonderful privilege and opportunity, and really enjoyed it. But, I mean, the academic world is extremely competitive and jobs are hard to find. So that was one element. But a lot of scholars a lot of students of English literature probably enjoy writing themselves creatively and might have a novel in the bottom drawer. So I did always like creative writing, even at school, entered competitions and so on. So it wasn't like it was a radical shift from one to the other. It was just more of a, I do enjoy analysing books, but part of the reason why I'm here is perhaps to understand how books are written and what makes a good book, and to understand the context of what's been written before. So I guess that ambition just kind of came to the fore, and I realised that's what I really enjoyed doing, even more than reading about books and analysing books. And I thought, well, if we've got a short time on this earth, I might as well pursue this interest and give it a go and see if I can take it anywhere. So I just started putting my time into that instead.
And it's something you find enjoyment in. It's not a chore.
Oh, well, I wouldn't say every single moment is thoroughly enjoyable. Most writers have a love-hate relationship to it. It's not been a short journey getting the book published. I've been trying to do it for a while, and along the way, it did feel a little bit like bashing my head against the wall, because writing the book is one thing, but then finding a publisher and finding a home for it is another. So it's not 100% enjoyable, but the moments when I've gotten peace and quiet and can sit at my desk and think about the story and just and it's going well and the ideas are coming and the words are coming, that's a lovely feeling. And so I suppose that's what keeps us fronting up at the desk, despite the frustrating times when the words aren't coming and you can't concentrate.
Have you got another book in the pipeline? I wondered if you were going to stick with the same genre too, with rural noir.
Yeah, I will. Well, I'll certainly stick with crime writing, and I think I'm settled on the thriller, the psychological thriller subsection of that. One of my earlier manuscripts was more of a police procedural, in the sense that it had investigating detectives and police. I first tried to model myself on P.D. James because I really admire her writing, and then I realised actually I don't actually need police officers in this book, and that frees me up. I don't need to worry about all that work. I can just concentrate on the really interesting bit, which is the characters and their motivations and why people do things, and concentrating on making the text as interesting and surprising as possible. So I'll probably stick with the psych thriller genre, and almost certainly set it in another Australian landscape that I enjoy spending time thinking about and imagining, but probably not the Blue Mountains.
Bronwyn Rivers talking about The Reunion, published by Hachette.
You're listening to Tsundoku, where, this world opens up. Thrills, spills, bit of romance, maybe some fairies.
Takes you away.
My mother was an avid reader, and so books were part of my life from as early as I can remember. As a child, if you had a sick day at home, she'd buy you a comic at the supermarket on the way home after she dropped the other children at school, so you'd read comics. And when you were a bit older, it was the weekly visits to the library and always borrowing 4 books, and sometimes reading 4 books a week during the school holidays. So the early influence was that of my mother. I think I can remember Nottingham Big Ears as featuring early, followed by Famous 5, Secret 7, the Narnia series. I remember The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe. It's all a bit hazy now, but certainly I just read constantly and would spend whole days in bed during the school holidays. My mother would come in at 5 o'clock and say, "Lesley, it's time to get up," because I'd be in bed all day with a book. So, yeah, quality children's literature I read as children. I was part of a big family, and certainly the older members of the family pre-TV were all very avid readers. I have a large pile next to my bed. I'm currently reading Under the Banner of Heaven by Jon Krakauer. I'm currently listening to, because I have a habit of listening and reading, I'm listening to Limberlost by Robbie Arnott, and by the bed is a significant pile which includes a Lisa C book. I think it's called The Chant of the Sea Women. I have The Wedding People, which was recommended to me as a very good plain read, by Alison Espach. I've just finished Pompeii by Robert Harris because I've actually just visited Pompeii, and it was a marvellous book to read in conjunction with Pompeii. I've also got my third CJ Sansom in that Tudor series, The Sovereign, which I haven't yet started yet, but I'll get on to soon, which is one of my concessions to murder mysteries. And another one called Jennifer Kairos, which was the International Booker winner, which I started but which is a bit heavy going, so whether I actually get through it, that remains to be seen. Plus a number of other books whose names I can't immediately recall. I will have to view the pile by the
bed. Speaking of what people are reading, what are you reading, Sarah?
Okay, I've been reading some crime thrillers lately. I've just sort of come off the back of a few sort of deeper dive, more literary stuff, and then I've gone, I need that refreshing thing. And I just was scrounging around for something and ended up finding Patricia Wolf's series, D.S. Walker. It's just set in the outback. I'm reading them completely out of order because I found one called Opal first that was set in the middle of a Queensland town where there was sort of a murder that basically the local, good-looking detective sergeant had just sort of ended up there by accident because he was visiting family and suddenly got into investigating murders around this potential find of a big opal and what that all meant for a small community. And so I just got sucked in. It was not heavy duty, easy reading, but, interesting enough to keep the pages turning, well thought out characters. So it was just enough to keep me there. When I got to the end of it, I didn't really want to think about what to read next. So I just went, what else is in this series? So I've just been reading my way through them. I'm on book 3 of 4, so I might move on again after that. But
That's such a nice way to read.
Oh, so good. How about you?
Well, I've just read Charlotte McConaughey's Wild Dark Shore, and you might remember her because we spoke to her a couple of years ago when she wrote Once There Were Wolves. This book is about a man and his 3 children who are the last ones left. They're like the caretakers of a tiny island down near the Antarctic. It's kind of an icy, wild part of the world. The seas are rising, and the island is home to a seed bank, the biggest seed bank in the world, which is being threatened by the rising seas. And onto this island, into this situation, a woman washes up half dead. So it works on all these different levels as a taut psychological thriller, which it really is. Who is she? Where are all the researchers that used to be there? There's a lot of mistrust between all the characters in this. It also works as a romance a bit later on. It's very pacey, which is something Charlotte McConaughey is very good at because she comes from a screenwriting background, so she knows how to keep a story tight and lots of cliffhangers chapter to chapter. I loved it. Highly recommended.
I think that's all we've got time for today.
It is indeed.
Nice to be with you here on Tsundoku again, Annie, and thanks to you for joining us. We'll be back soon with another episode.
Catch you then.
Bye.
Tsundoku is a podcast about books and writing by 4 book lovers.
Kath Keneally.
Michaela Andreev.
Sarah Martin.
And me, Annie Hastwell. If the authors we talk to or the books we mention in this episode have piqued your interest, check out our show notes, where you'll also find a treasure trove, a back catalogue of author interviews and reflections on writing built up over more than 50 episodes. You can find Tsundoku on Facebook and Instagram at TsundokuCast. And if you've read a book you'd like to recommend, we'd love to hear from you. Our thanks to composer Quincy Grant for the music.